This is 4 Tracks Good, Sacred Cow. It's where Neil and I discuss an album that one of us likes and one of us doesn't like so much. In this episode, we discuss the debut album by the Stone Roses. Do you like it? Can we change your mind? Can one of us change each other's minds? Stay tuned and find out.
His vocals are one of the strongest features of the band, and it just becomes a bit long and tedious. His guitar's too loud in the mix, and it's as though he's just in a bedroom accompanying a record. It has to be one of the laziest tracks that have been included. I just don't think it hangs together as a song by itself. It's very forgettable.
I think it's a great track. I love that laid-back, groovy rhythm. But he has got quite an effortless delivery of vocals, and that's part of his charm. I think the harmonies on the chorus are amazing, don't you think?
Yeah,
and it's got to be the song to sing along to in the shower, don't you think, Neil? So, hi Neil. The Stone Roses debut album, English rock band, the Stone Roses, released it in 1989, which is 36 years ago. It's aged well, don't you think?
No.
We'll come to that. But before we discuss the album in any detail, we do have some vinyl to talk through. Just to set the timeline. So Stone Roses released their first single, which was called So Young, and I don't have that. It's worth a fortune, as you'd expect for a band of their stature. But after that, they released Sally Cinnamon. And then after that, it was Elephant Stone. And after that, we had Made of Stone.
And after that, did you have the Rosetta Stone?
No, we had the album itself, the Stone Roses debut album.
Seat of Scone.
And after that, we had Fool's Gold, which was an incredible single, but we're not going to be talking about that. We're also not going to be talking about the US release of the album, because for those fans of the album will know that the US version includes Fool's Gold. It also includes Elephant Stone as well, doesn't it? So they added those, much to the... I don't think the band really wanted it. Yeah. And it didn't really do much for their US sales anyway. But we're not going to go there. We're going to stick with the UK release of the album in this discussion.
It's assuming most of the people listening to it are in the UK, and even if they're not, may not have heard that US version anyway. And the argument's the same as it is. It doesn't matter if it's the UK, the US, or the Ghanaian version. The point still remains.
Yeah. But before we start, Neil, I think I need to change my headwear, don't you?
If you want, that's fine.
One moment.
Okay.
So I've donned my bucket hat. What do you think, Neil?
Just move on.
So bucket hats, obviously popularised by the Stone Roses. They'd been around before that in various subcultures, but Rennie, their drummer, was a big fan of bucket hats. And I must admit, at the time, I didn't really wear one, but I find them quite practical now for keeping the sun off my neck. You should try one, Neil.
Well, I got one years ago, and I got it, but just for practical purposes. And I don't wear it, though. That's the key thing, because I look like some bloody late 80s, early 90s Manc wannabe. So there you go. It's gone.
What can I say? Well, that was a little bit about the fashion of the time.
Yeah, okay.
As is tradition on this podcast, you like to give a bit of a historical context to what we're talking about. So what was happening around 1989 in the UK?
Well, it's a time where Britain is coming out of one recession, then a period of boom, then it's about to go into another one. It's also the last year or so of Mrs. Thatcher's government, and the poll tax is about to come in, and her cabinet are just falling apart. But musically, I think what's interesting is you've got two or three different things that I think are interconnected. You've got the rise of music released on independent labels. It always been that, but it seemed to be that more of these artists were gaining prominence. Whether it is, on a label like Rough Trade or Creation or Heavenly or Kitchenware, big fans of Prefab Sprout. But you've also got within Manchester, I think the sort of nucleus of bands that are seemingly gaining a bit of popularity around the same time. Clearly, late 70s, early 80s, Joy Division, New Order had pioneered that, along with a Certain Ratio and Duity Column and all the work the Factory was doing. But of course, you get the emergence of bands like the Smiths, the first James album, which is released independently. The Fall are producing albums at a rate faster even than the rate they're replacing guitarists, and that's just some of the sort of the big three, and then there's obviously behind that you've got other bands that are coming through, and so I think people are associating that growth of independent record with what's happening in Manchester. But what I think is linked to the musical development in Manchester is that city itself is starting to go through a process of deindustrialisation, a process which I think it certainly leaves the country in very much so, and that a combination of government money, of a council that's pretty forward thinking, and deciding that they're going to base the new Manchester around the service economy. Andy Spinoza's book, which I've read before, I've mentioned before, is really, really good on this. Dave Haslam's book on Manchester Pop Culture, we've both read that. That's terrific on how this is happening. So Manchester is a place that is seemingly starting to come out of the doldrums and to grow up, and culturally we're seeing that as well, alongside this emergence of this sort of independent music scene which we've seen. So it is quite an interesting period to be in. I don't know, what were you in sixth form, 1989? How old were you?
I was, yeah, and I bought the album in 1989 when it came out, and yeah, as I think we've said before, it became the passport to get into Manchester, and I came to Manchester for university, having listened to this album just before coming, and it was almost part of Manchester already. It was already with me upon arrival. Really.
Isn't that a line from a song?
Possibly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but that's interesting because I've been a bit older and wiser and more experienced. I was at university at that point, so I was able to look at it in a more detached way, actually, and a bit of perspective, which I think comes to bear in our respective analysis of the album, actually. So I didn't associate it quite as much with my own experience at that point. Because I'd started university in '88, Anyway, that'll be interesting to see where we go with this.
And the album itself didn't really get too much acclaim when it was first released, did it?
Good reason. Yeah. No, it didn't. No, but you're right. Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out why that was, and it's probably for a number of reasons. I think there was
very good.
I think we'll come to that point a little later, Neil. But I think there was a lot of hype built up before it was released, and maybe expectations were high. And there was also an element. It is, you may say otherwise, but it is quite experimental in parts, and maybe people just weren't ready for an album like this.
We're not talking about Steve Reich album here. We're just talking about guitar-based drums and.
Well, we'll come to that again.
Kind of vocalist.
And I think there's something quite English about it as well that maybe, well, certainly the US didn't get initially, and people like you still haven't got. But I don't know what your thoughts, why it didn't really get the acclaim initially and has in later years. I think NME voted the best album of all time. I might be wrong there, but there's been
the NME that's gone to the wall, it's gone bankrupt for whatever reason.
It's ended up in a lot of best albums.
No, it has. It has, and I
rightly so.
It really surprises me the degree to which these polls, place it so highly. It really, really does surprise me. But hey ho, that's the nature of polls, isn't it? And it's sort of evaluating their purpose and who are they polling. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think in order to properly assess this album and have a a sensible discussion about it. We need to listen to it track by track.
Okay.
And discuss each of the tracks
Yeah.
in a quite analytical way.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So what we're going to do is get some speakers set up, have a listen to the tracks, and we'll talk about each one as we go.
Yeah.
I Want to Be Adored, the opening track. What are your thoughts, Neil?
This isn't one of the tracks that I dislike that much, actually. I think it is one of the stronger tracks on the album. And in some ways, it represents what's good and what is not so good about this album, and possibly the Stone Roses generally. I like the way that the song seems to be rooted in the city. There is that sort of urban hum.
Yeah, it's got kind of an industrial background at the start. Yeah.
It has, and I think that works well with that initial bass riff. And I think that Marnie's bass playing, I think, is one of the strengths of the band, actually. And when he's given a bit more free rein, I think actually the songs are better for it. And I also like the sort of more gentle paired back guitar that comes in, and Rennie's drumming. So it builds up quite nicely. But the bit I don't like so much, you said before them has been a rock band, and I think that's it. I think just before it goes into the vocals, it gets into quite a traditional sort of rock rhythm. And John Squire can't resist adding another guitar layer and another guitar line and another guitar line. And Ian Brown's vocals, they're okay. They're softer at first. There's lots of reverb on them. So that's okay. I don't mind this track that much, but I do think it's a bit busy at times. But it's a pretty good album opener, actually.
Yeah. I love the way it's quite a slow, broody opening, if you like, and then that bass line comes in from Manny. It's just wow. And then the crash with Rennie to start the. If I was to criticise the track, it does go on a little bit. The lyrics are a little bit repetitive on this, but I don't get me wrong. It's still a really catchy song. I think one for singing along.
But I think the repetition of the lyrics actually helps it. It's a sort of driving, moody vibe to it, isn't it?
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
rather than it's not really saying anything, is it? It's
No,
not a
there's
story
very
that's
few
being told.
lyrics in this song.
Yeah.
And I think as an opener, it's the right track.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely.
So I think I'm fairly positive from you on that one, Neil.
Reasonably so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's take a listen to the second track. Okay. Which is She Bangs the Drums. So a much more upbeat, jangly guitar, catchy riffs type song compared to the opener. What do you think of this?
I quite like She Bangs the Drum. It's got a good tune. Again, I think it's really nicely produced. They bring in some backing vocals here as well, which I think add a bit of depth to it. It's not too fussy with the guitar playing. It's quite a nice tune, really, and it does act as a sort of a decent juxtaposition to the first one. And I suppose this is the sort of Stone Roses track that people associate with them. This is that template, isn't it, really? The one bit that I'm not so sure about, and I think this becomes a bit of a feature of some of the lyrics, is the sort of punching down and the sort of rather aggressive approach to presumably a former girlfriend or someone as well in there as well, which are quite unpleasant. And I don't think add to it from what is quite a sort of joyful musical palette that they create. But no, it's a decent track. I haven't got a problem with She Bangs the Drum at all.
Yeah. And I love Rennie's harmonies over the top of Ian Brown. He does it so well on this track, doesn't he?
His vocals are one of the strongest features of the band, and actually it's a bit criminal they're not used more often, because where they are used, they really do enhance it.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, it's a great pop song, great harmonies. Yeah, and a great sing-along track.
Yeah.
Again, I think, yeah. So two brilliant songs to start with.
Two okay songs that they kicked off with. That's fine, yeah.
So let's go on to the third track, which is Waterfall. So Waterfall, what do you think? I mean, this is another brilliant track. It's kind of jangly guitars with that kind of lush layers over the top. What do you think, Neil?
Parts of it are really beautiful. I think the lyrics were just just don't add anything to it at all, really. And I think again it's another one of those where I think that the bass takes it to somewhere else.
Yeah, it starts with that great riff, and then the bass comes in it.
Yeah, and and again, I think the drums of Rennie are really good on this. I think there's a neat idea which they overplay, and then of course they get to the second bit, and it just becomes a bit long and tedious.
So this is around the 3-minute mark where they basically stop everything and jam for about a minute. It's not too long.
It seems longer, but John Squire's a melodic guitarist, clearly technically very talented, but this is one of those examples where, and he does this a fair amount, probably a lot on the second album, he's playing without any regard to what anybody else is doing. His guitar's too loud in the mix, and it's as though he's just in a bedroom accompanying another record. You've got Marnie doing something that's really quite nice, and he's just got horrible distorted Les Paul he's got over the top, and it just seems unrelated to anything else that the rest of the group are playing at that time. And I think it's just sort of pretty tedious, just sort of guitar. Well, I won't say what I was going to say, but yeah, I just don't think it really adds anything at all. It would have been better as a shorter 3-minute song, maybe with an acoustic.
Well, it's only 4 minutes or so. It's not, not particularly long.
Longest 4 minutes in history. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, I just like his simple riffs. Some of them are very simple, aren't they? There are complexities to this particular track. There's changing time signatures, but they are quite,
simple.
Simple, yeah. But they work.
Yeah, well, I think this is one where he goes into his Guitar Hero mode, and it becomes all about him, really, and the sounds he can produce, and not about the needs of the song, which is something I think he is guilty of.
Right. So the first track that maybe shows some signs that Neil is, not enjoying the album. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I'll come back to my summary later on, but I think it's one where there's some decent bits to it, but it's just okay.
Okay,
it's just okay.
Right, let's move on to the next track. Don't Stop.
Yeah.
Okay, Don't Stop. So for those who don't know, this was based on the previous track Waterfall, which they played backwards, listened to, and they took the foundations of that backwards playing of Waterfall to build upon and put new lyrics to it. And I think John Leckie probably did some more kind of tweaks to it, overlaid various bits, accentuated parts of the mix. So we end up with this track which you can hear Waterfall in it, but it is a different track. So what did you think of it?
Well, I presume the title of Don't Stop is ironic, because after listening to this, I think most people are willing to confess to anything, really. They just stop. It has to be one of the laziest tracks that have been included on an album, full stop. If it was a B-side, okay, fair enough. But it is, for all of that stuff about they've brought certain things up in the mix, it's Waterfall played backwards. Well, actually, it's not played back. It's just it's spilled backwards, which you can do for 30 seconds or so. But it's been done before, the backwards played track. Maybe they're trying to get that sort of Midwestern American Bible Belt listenership, looking for, Ian Brown saying, give yourself to the devil, sacrifice all, obey Satan. Well, they're thinking that's in there, and they think, I just think it's awful. I really do. You just submitted a track that's the same as the previous one, but played backwards, and there's a real laziness to it.
So I don't think it's the strongest track on the album, for sure.
That's very generous of you. Yeah. Okay.
I have. If you look on YouTube, I'll give you the link. There is a video which shows basically what the band listened to base the foundations on it. It sounds very different to the final track. So maybe
they listened to Waterfall.
They did backwards, and it is very different. I think there's probably more creativity gone into that track than maybe you're giving credit for, Neil, except you don't like the track. But if you hadn't heard Waterfall immediately before it, maybe you'd have a different view on that track.
Well, I suppose it's relevant whether Waterfall came after or before it. It is just Waterfall played backwards. I think there's a degree of post-event rationalisation taking place here. I'm trying to add a creative gleam to what is. How do we fill the album? I mean, I can't remember actually how long the album is. It's not that long, is it? But how do we add another, whatever it is, 3 minutes?
I think the problem with this track is it comes immediately after Waterfall. I think if they'd placed it maybe on the second half of the album as like a callback to it in a way, it might have worked better. I think it's a little bit fatiguing to hear back to back.
Yeah, I think it is bad scheduling. I'd agree with that. It is really poor scheduling. But I think if you'd have done it as a 30-second callback, at the start of side 2 or at the end after the last track is finished, maybe.
Yeah.
But to actually create a discrete track out of this, I just think it's really lazy.
Yeah, I like the track. It's not my favourite on the album. I'll give you that.
Thanks.
Next track is Bye Bye Bad Man. Let's have a listen. Okay, Bye Bye Bad Man, Neil. What did you think?
It's just okay. I think it's, it's interesting, I think, because one of the aspects of this album's reputation is it's supposed to introduce us into a brave new world of indie dance and blah, 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 blah. Be very forward-looking. But actually, I think it's a very retrospective album. It's a very backwards-looking album. And I'm not saying that as itself is a bad thing, but it's an album that harks back to the 60s beat groups more than looking forward, I think. So I don't think it offers anything new, really. And this is an example of that, actually. I don't think it seems to work, whether he's put together different bits of songs into one, but they don't seem to fit together very well. I mean, Rennie's drums are all over the shop, and there's a bit of repetition of his shuffle that he's done elsewhere. I just don't think it hangs together as a song by itself. It's very forgettable. It's one of those when I think back to the album, you go, oh God, that's on it. You forget that's on the album.
Right. Well,
clearly you disagree.
Yeah. Well, I do. I think it's a great track. I love that laid back, groovy rhythm, and I think that contrasts with the lyrics, which I don't know if you viewers know, based upon student riots that took place in Paris in the late 60s, and that's the reference on the cover. So you can see there's the lemons on the cover, which the students would suck to combat the effects of the tear gas, and also the French flag on there, which I think at the time when I bought the album I didn't really see it. Only recently I thought, actually, the French flag's on there. What's that there for? But yeah, so I like the contrasting kind of tone to the tune and the lyrics, and I don't know. I think it's the way it plods along quite slowly, and then at the end, it goes off. It almost builds the tension up and goes on a different direction at the end. I really like it, and the chorus is brilliant.
I don't think there's that great a release though. Sometimes the songs do build up and build up and build up. And then there's the great release.
I think you need to have another listen to this.
I don't know. I think it's one of the things. One of the things I would say is that although I like John Lecky's production on some of the album, I think this is really badly mixed. There's far too much reverb on it. Everything just seems a bit of a mess. So if there is anything amazingly creative taking place, it's much harder on this one. It almost seems a bit unfinished, a bit unpolished as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
There you go. So. That was Bye Bye Bad Man. The next track is Elizabeth, My Dear.
Yeah, okay.
So a bit of a fun filler, that one. Less than a minute long. Melody is based upon the Scarborough Fair folk song. It's a filler track, and what can you say? It's not my favourite on the album.
Well, that's two that are not the favourite on it so far. But it's interesting. I said earlier that the album in many ways is a throwback to the 60s rather than something that was essentially creative and forward-looking. And here you go. Obviously, Simon and Garfunkel reinvented the traditional folk song of Scarborough Fair. Back on, which album was it? I think it's called, which was it, Rosemary Saves in Time, the album? But anyway, and here they are. I mean, this is a really if anybody isn't sure what the Roses are about, this is it. They're just writ large. We are a sort of massively 60s influenced band, and that's what drives us. And the lyrics are just, if you get some political, that's fine. I just think they're nasty and pointless. I just think it is a throwaway track. And for an album that's venerated so highly, we've got one track which is a repeat of the other one played backwards, and we've got a filler which is lifting entirely a folk song that was done in the 60s.
Moving on to the next track, Song for My Sugar Spun Sister. Song for My Sugar Spun Sister. So I've got a psychedelic feel to it, jangly pop, nice lush guitar textures. What do you think, Neil?
I wonder what his sister thought of it. If that's for me, crikey. Again, it's okay, but we've kind of been there before with this. That guitar, the melody, I think it repeats what it's done elsewhere. There's even, whether it's a knowing nod, so this is the one, it's almost identical, bit of a drop in there. It's just okay. I think there's a bit of a lack of originality there. There's no real purpose to it. And I think it starts to illustrate the weakness of him as a vocalist, that it's very much at one level. He's got sort of one note, and I don't mean one literal note, but one way of expressing it himself. And doesn't seem to be any real passion or feeling behind how he delivers whatever he's trying to say. So I think the words just get lost in the noise and the music that's created.
But he has got quite an effortless delivery of vocals, and that's part of his charm.
It's lazy. Effortless. I'm speaking to 30 odd years in the classroom.
Didn't he once
effortless is lazy?
Didn't he once say it takes effort to be effortless or something like that?
Yeah, that's the sort of thing a 15-year-old would say after producing a piece of crap coursework or something. I'm really a genius. No, it's just. If we take as face value everything Ian Brown says, I think we're in a dark place. But I think it needs more.
I think the harmonies on the chorus are amazing, don't you think?
Again, who does the harmonies?
Yeah,
it's not Ian Brown, is it? As well, and I think.
But you've got to look at the whole band as complete. And Rennie and Ian Brown, they just work so well together, don't they? And maybe that's they should have done more of that.
Ian Brown off it and just give it anyway. That's for another time, isn't it? I think the song's okay. It just drifts along. You said before about a song plodding along. Yeah, it's just another one. It's just there. It's another one you'd forget it's on the album, actually. Yeah, and I have listened to it, and I did go back and I'd listened to the album again, and it was actually worse than I remembered it being the first. But I thought anyway, it's just a so-so track.
So let's move on to the next track, which is Made of Stone.
Okay.
So Made of Stone, a standout song, I'd say, and it's got to be the song to sing along to in the shower, don't you think, Neil?
No, well, it's one of the better ones on the album. It's certainly quite catchy, isn't it? I think
it is. Yeah, it's got an anthem. It's more an anthem, isn't it?
Yeah, it propels a bit further forward, and it's a bit busy. I think it's one of those where probably if someone had just said to John Squire, "Look, pal, let's take at least 7 of those guitar tracks off it, and we'll leave it as it is." And
there's good interplay between the instruments on this one. I think they all kind of play off each other, don't you think?
To a degree, but I still think there's loads they could have taken off. It would have worked. A bit of space might have benefited the track. I think also there's an element of listening to this album of what else you associate it with, and I think this is one of those where you do associate it with groups of lads, and that they wouldn't embrace pop music before, but they're going to embrace this form of pop music because it's done by some mank lads, and they single onto this. So there is a degree that you're sort of judging a record by how it's been taken and appropriated, and I think that track certainly. But I think it's quite a nice track. Yeah, It's quite easy to play on the guitar as well, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, have you played it on the guitar?
Yeah, because I have to. Yeah, it's that descending chord pattern. It's quite nice, and then it goes to a more uplifting major chord pattern for the chorus, which works very well. It's a very Beatlesy trick. So again, it's a very 60s track.
It is. Yeah.
Well, it's not a bad thing, but that's what it is.
Yeah, and Rennie is sublime again on
He's
this.
good, and he's a really
sublime.
good drummer.
In fact, I think John Leckie said he was the best drummer he's ever worked with.
I think that the rhythm section are the strongest feature of this band, actually.
Yeah, next track is Shoot You Down. So Shoot You Down, bit of a slower, kind of more atmospheric build-up on this one. Kind of bluesy guitar fills in there by Squire. What did you think of this one?
Turn it down. All right. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the bluesy thing there, because I think he's trying to do a bit of a Peter Green, Albatross sound there, isn't he? I think, if you listen to that early Fleetwood Mac. It's just... But again, Peter Green's got some... Peter Green's got some depth to his singing as well. And I think a bit more feeling to his guitar playing, and I think as a result, this can seem it's a bit insipid. It just kind of it's there.
It's got the quite somber lyrics,
but it's just musically it doesn't really go anywhere. It
doesn't, but I think that's the point of the track. It's kind of that steady bass. Drums are nice and clean on it. The way the bass jams at the ends,
again, it's another one you would forget was on the album. There's a number of tracks. There's some because there's lots of singles that have come from the album, and ones that have been played to death in 42nd Street or Fifth Avenue or the like, indie clubs in Manchester. But this is one of those very forgettable ones that they've just stuck on.
Yeah, I disagree. Obviously, I think this.
But what's so great about this? Because obviously the thing is, this was being one of the great albums. So what's so great about this track?
I don't think it's not the strongest track on the album, in my opinion, for sure. But I think it's the complete album is what makes it, rather than any individual. It's the sum of the parts, really, for me. But I think, as you said earlier, it's about the context of when you were listening to it, when and where you were listening to it, and I think that maybe has a bearing on our feelings of the album.
Yeah, I think, and that's one of the great things about music. You associate when you bought it and when it was in your life, where you were, who you were with, what you were doing, and that music certainly exists on an emotional level. And I think this album is one that is looked through very small rose-tinted spectacles because of probably where people were in their lives and maybe what was happening, nationally. And so I think it's benefited from that rather than this cold, hard, analytical view of its collection of songs. I don't know if others clearly disagree with that, but I think it is one of those that's associated with a time, and so people have overlooked. I think the singles are pretty good. I think that's where their strength is actually at this time. I think as an album though, I think there's too many filler bits in it. But we're not finished the album yet, so
we're not. I'm not sure your opinion is going to change. In fact, I know it's not going to change.
I am a very open-minded.
Anyway,
young man.
Next track up is "This Is the One."
Okay.
So you're a Manchester United fan.
I know, and I think this is a part of the issue with this. They play it before every home game, and they have done for about 30 years.
Yeah, I think did Gary Neville choose it?
He may well have done. So
I think there's some dispute.
Don't let your right back choose the music. There's your lesson there. I just heard it too often, and through the speakers at Old Trafford. I also think it's a bit similar to some of the other tracks on the album. Similar pace. I don't know whether it's the same key. Vocals aren't really about anything. Overproduced guitars. So I don't really think it adds anything to what is actually already on the album. That's one of the problems with this track. I don't think there's anything sufficiently different about it. And I'm not even sure what is it. This is the one. This is about if somebody really likes, or I wasn't really quite sure what the lyrics were about either.
Yeah, does it matter? I think it's a great anthem. Not having heard it over the Old Trafford speakers probably helps, because they're not very good speakers, are they?
No,
but I think it's a powerful track. A great opening riff. If anything, is probably a little bit. The opening's probably a little bit too long for my liking. It does go on a little bit too long. But then towards the end, where they just completely freak out. To be honest, this could have been a closer to the album. I think it would make a great closer. The way it ends.
If it meant it was at least one track fewer, then it would be. I get that. I get that. It's very triumphalist, and there's the real triumphalism for this, and some people love that sense of, here they are, they were fully formed, they came on the scene, and they weren't going to take any messing. They'll have nobody supporting them at Alexandra Palace or Blackpool Empress Ballroom. They play Spike Island after one album. But I think it's pretty hollow. I think it's okay with triumphalist if you've got a message to get across, or actually you've got something behind you. Otherwise, it can smack of hubris. And as we know, that I think is a term that could be applied to this band and others writ large. And maybe that's the nature of pop music. Yeah. You want something that's going to challenge and be very upfront.
But they weren't particularly upfront in their political views, although there are political views on this album.
More so attitudinally, though, isn't it? That's the thing that they're sort of, we're young men, we're here. And
that swagger, that Manchester swagger, it's not... But probably less so than bands like Oasis that came
But
after.
Here is one of the issues, and maybe it's unfair. I blame Oasis on this, and this whole, and people took the swagger bit, which actually isn't the city. I mean, our grandparents and parents are from Manchester, and you'd walk around in the 70s, you want to see people swaggering around in a lot like this, and bear in mind the fact that at least two of them are from Altrincham. I think it's just a bit contrived. It's a bit like when Ian Brown pulls the plug on their Late Show performance, and come on, you're just a pop band. It's all just a bit unnecessary, I think. And it would be an interesting counterfactual without Stone Roses. Do you get Oasis?
I don't think you do. I think it's well documented that they went to see them play
and took the wrong bits.
Unfortunately, I mean, Oasis is another story.
They are. But what's that story?
What is that story, Neil? Yeah, set you up there. But I think their first album has good parts to it. But we're not going to go down the Oasis route. No. Maybe that's for another time. But yeah,
I think if we're really desperate, like we are incredibly thirsty in an arid desert, we will find the Oasis. But see, this is really working on lots of levels. Yeah. But I don't think any of their stuff comes anywhere close to be held up to be a sacred cow.
No,
anyone
I'd agree.
Who has got functioning faculties and the ability to hear clearly.
Yeah. Others may disagree.
That's the great thing about art.
Put them in the comments. Anyway, This Is the One. I thought it was a great closer, but there's an even better closer coming up, the actual closer.
Yeah.
I Am the Resurrection, Neil.
Resurrection, indeed.
Here it is. So, what an epic track. What an epic track to close the album, Neil. What do you think? It's probably everybody's favourite. Is it yours?
Well, and the best ever version of this, as Gary, you will remember, was done at my 40th.
Of course.
Well, for those of you, obviously most of you weren't there, and it was a legendary trio of Paul on lead and vocals. I hacked around on my acoustic, and you were on bongos, I believe.
That's right.
And it was for the benefit of those people who attended my 40th. We did it in the kitchen. We locked all the doors so nobody could escape, and they sat through a mashup, I think the kids would call it today, of this and Sympathy for the Devil. There weren't much sympathy for us when we finished.
No.
But it was still probably the best version of it. It is an epic. And, who hasn't got up at 1 a.m. in a club and danced around to this and put your arms around your mates and said, everything's right with the world. And I think it's quite a good chat. I think the guitar wig out is probably a bit long. And I think the combination of the drums and the bass, I think, are the strongest features of this. Yeah. I don't like his triumphalist lyrics. I've said that before. So it's a good track. I wouldn't dispute it. It's euphoric. It makes you feel good. Have I listened to it much outside of a nightclub? Probably not. But hey, that's okay. It works. It has a place. But it's not the worst track on the album, and it's one I would I would play.
I think it highlights Squire's guitar skills probably more so than a lot of the other tracks. I know the drums and the bass are brilliant, but I think his guitar on this is probably the best.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think it's because it's in support of the song.
Yes, yeah.
Rather than just him having a bit of a noodle.
Yeah.
And so I think that does work.
Yeah, and the way it starts and stops throughout, you think it's going to end, and it just gets better and better. I mean, it is incredible closing track. Yeah, I don't get tired of listening to it. I don't get the album out and listen to it end to end much. But if it comes on the radio, some songs when you've heard again and again, I've got to listen to this. But I don't get tired of listening to either this track or any tracks on the album. It's one of those albums.
Yeah, and I was reflecting on this, that there are some tracks that you hear a lot and they still sound fresh to you, and you pick out something different. And whilst I think this has got some quite good singles on it, it's rare that I will listen and it will throw up something else, or there's a particular refrain where I think, I hadn't noticed that, or that works really well. And I think that possibly implicit in that is a criticism of it. I think we know it wears its tricks quite heavily. There's not an awful lot of subtlety to the album. Ironically, given what we said before about the vocals, I think if they'd have probably pushed Rennie's vocals a bit more, I think that would have, because I think he is trying to do something a bit different in there. But for whatever reason, they're not as high in the mix as maybe they could be. Yeah. But I mean, it's a good song. It's a good way to end the album. Yeah, certainly. I think it's probably the strongest part of the album.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of that one. I don't think you've changed my opinion, Neil. I still think it's a great album. It's not the best album of all time by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an album that I'm always going to love. Always has that place, as we discussed about earlier. It's all about the context as well. Yeah, and I don't think I've changed your mind either. But I'd be interested to hear what our viewers think on this.
Yeah, but I think you touched on something there, though, about you never want to undermine someone's experience of an album, because at a certain time it means a lot to them. But that's, I think, different again from saying this is one of the great albums. There's no way on earth this could be number one in any poll of greatest albums ever made, because it's okay. There's some good singles on it. There's a lot of filler on it, and it's just okay. I wouldn't say any more than that. And probably its significance is more in what it tells us about what was happening at that time within.
And I think that is a large part of the album, and also what went on afterwards, which you may not have enjoyed particularly, but it was the start of something. It was the start of.
But that's my point. I don't think it was the start of anything. I think actually it only exists because of the emergence of other Manchester bands and independent music, and records on brought out by independent labels. So I think it's tied in with that, rather than, because actually they disappear. I mean, I know we're not talking about the Second Coming, but they disappear for 5 years. So they are separate actually to the whole sort of Britpop thing. And I also think they are responsible for that. The whole baggy thing was baggy. I mean, there's the clue. There's nothing tight or precise about it. It's baggy. It's full of air. There's no real great substance to it, which I don't think is a brilliant musical legacy. I don't think they're a band that really were hugely influential in creating something really strong and pronounced and long-lasting after that. We talked about Oasis, but I mean, they deserve their own category. What I think they do influence is a style of music which has a degree of resonance in the short term, and maybe that's just a reflection of people wanting to like something that's pop, but they don't want to like pop. And I think that's something that's tied in with this as well, that people view pop as something that's inferior to something serious like this rock. And they are trying to be very serious, aren't they? I think they're not flippant musicians. And I think that's quite sad, because pop is essentially ephemeral. It's fun, you know, great songs in there. But, you know, you're a big fan of Robin. You know, Robin's great pop. And I would take a Robin track, an album, any day over the Stone Roses. So I shall... It's been interesting talking about it, though, actually. And I know it's a controversial one, isn't it?
It is, and I think the release of Fool's Gold after this, I think Fool's Gold is an amazing track, and maybe that it wouldn't fit well. It doesn't fit well on the US version of this album. It's a very different style, and that maybe was the thing that moved things forward, progressed the sound of Manchester a bit more than this album.
That's interesting, because I think this idea that we alluded to earlier, that they somehow engender a new form of music, you know, indie dance, is based purely on that one track, not on the album.
I mean, there is some kind of funky elements, dancey elements
to this. It's quite a
this.
Conservative album, though, isn't it? It's a conservative.
It is, but it
album.
was going in that direction. There were elements in there. It's just when you got to Fool's Gold, it was just a bit more.
I'd love to know how that was created. Whether actually it was just sort of jamming between maybe Rennie and Marnie, and they sort of work on something, and then they add the guitar, because it really is it's their track, isn't it? I think more than anything else.
It is, yeah. Brilliant track, though, but we're not talking about that. We have spoken, we've had some great conversation about the Stone Roses' debut album. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I did. And we're going to look forward to another Sacred Cow in the future.
Yeah, you can take the hat off now.
Oh, no. I'll leave it on for the rest of the day. But we'd love to know if you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you next time. 4 Tracks Good. Bye for now.